beneath the black hollow, and it was watching. By the time Evelyn climbed the last slope that led into the hollow, the sky had already decided to forget color. It fell away into cold gray, and with each step, she felt the place rearrange itself around her memory. The road was the same crooked scar it had been, but the air felt practiced, as if someone had rehearsed silence while she was gone. She carried a rusted lantern and a folded photograph, both heavier than she expected. The house waited with one dim window like a polite, tired eye. The porch boards sighed under her weight. They remembered other footprints. She paused at the threshold, because some thresholds ask questions before letting you cross. A child's wooden horse sat haphazardly on the step, paint chipped to tooth-bare wood. The wind made no sound, but shifted curtains inside the house in a way that felt purposeful, like a slow, patient answer. Evelyn smoothed the photograph with a thumb. Someone Martha's handwriting had scrawled a single word on the back: wait. She found little things that didn't belong to time. A line of pebbles placed along the sill, not scattered, but arranged, as if to measure a breath. The kitchen clock had stopped at a minute to midnight, but the hands had dust rings like moons around them, which suggested someone had been there more recently than the layers of dust allowed. Notes in Martha's tidy script were tucked inside drawers, reminders to buy milk, to close the well. But one note was smudged into an unreadable smear, the edges of the paper worn like a secret. At night, the hollow rearranged perception. Sounds compressed and echoed with polite delay. Her footsteps came back to her like questions answered in another room. Once far off, something brushed the undergrowth in a rhythm that matched her heartbeat if she dared listen closely. The watcher wasn't a face she could meet. It was a precise attentiveness, a pressure to the air that tightened the places where she tried to remember. She began to check the corners of rooms, pockets of shadow, as if the house might hide an apology. Evelyn slept poorly, if at all. Memory became a duplicate language. She woke fluent in certain dates and forgetful about whole afternoons. The photograph, opened that morning, showed a group Martha, a young Evelyn, another figure at the edge with its face almost entirely scratched away. The gouge in the print felt deliberate, like someone had decided that the shape of a person could be taught into nothing. She tried to remember the person who'd been erased. The absence responded with a sense that she shouldn't remember. Neighbors mentioned odd things with apologetic smiles. Lights moving across the hollow on nights when no car passed. The sound of someone pacing the old stone wall at dawn. A dog that refused to enter the field. Their stories were offered like half sentences, the ones people say when they want you to decide whether to stay or go. A woman at the post office said she had felt watched while she stacked envelopes. And when Evelyn asked her to clarify, the woman's gaze slid away, and her hands trembled as if she held a secret too close to skin. Evelyn cataloged these improbabilities like a scientist marking irregularities. She began to map them: times, locations, the weather when the watching felt strongest. The pattern made a hollow circle around the house, edges clean, center unsettled. Once, while walking the boundary at twilight, she saw indentations in the grass that suggested someone had knelt, not to pray, but study the house from an angle. Beside the marks lay a scrap of paper with a single number written in haste. She didn't know why the number mattered, but she kept it anyway. Days merged into a thin film. Evelyn began leaving small offerings, tea steeped too long set on the porch, a coat thrown over the banister, gestures meant equally for Martha and for whatever watched. Each time she returned, the items had shifted but not taken. The teacup moved to the step, the coat folded inward like it had been looked at. The hollow's attentions were meticulous and faintly obscene in their care. It felt as though something was practicing being human by rearranging her things into polite sentences. One night she followed a sound to the small grove behind the house, a breath caught in grass. There, under a bent tree, was a ring of tiny stones with a blank center like a waiting face. The stones were warm, as if they had recently been cupped. In the dirt sat the child's wooden horse, perfectly upright and free of the dust that coated everything else. Evelyn reached toward it and stopped. The hair on her arms lifted at a sensation that felt like being acknowledged by a roomful of eyes. She stepped back with the horse between her palms. After that night, the hollow's precision became more active. Notes appeared in margins of Martha's books, phrases scrawled in a hand that mimicked Martha, but wasn't skillful enough to fool Evelyn. The margin notes were small commands. Remember, look, wait. Sometimes the handwriting tried to be Evelyn's own and failed. She found footprints near the well that were neither small nor large, an indeterminate size meant to unsettle more than to inform. The sense of being observed tightened until she could feel it at the base of her throat. Instead of leaving, she asked questions. To the photograph, to the horse, to Martha's notes, she whispered, "What are you? Why me?" Answers never came in words. They came as alignments, a breeze that made the photograph flutter open to different face, the lantern's ember flaring to reveal a smudge on the wall that looked like eyes. Once, in the kitchen, the radio she hadn't turned on began to hum a melody she remembered from childhood, one that never actually existed outside her memory. The house folded back, her past into a present that felt threaded with other hands. On the morning she planned to leave, she found the photograph face down on the table, the scratched figure turned slightly toward her like a thought settling. The number from the scrap of paper had been placed beneath the child's horse. Her suitcase stood open, half-packed, as if someone had paused her departure. The watcher had learned to ask without words, would she stay or teach it how to be left alone? The decision pressed at her like a bruise, soft at first, then impossible to ignore. She left the lantern on the table and put the photograph back in its envelope. When she walked down the road, she expected the attention to peel off like mist. Instead, the hollow watched the way a person watches a door close, patient, understanding the point where something has gone, but not forgetting the sound it made. At the ridge she paused, turned, and looked back. The house still sat with its one dim eye. There was no monstrous face in the window, only a darkness that felt politely attentive. She felt conspicuously recorded, as if the hollow had catalogued how she looked leaving and stored that image somewhere secret. Months later, she received a postcard with no return address. On it was a single line in Martha's hand. "It is watching." Evelyn kept it in a drawer and sometimes took it out to see if the letters had changed. They did not. The hollow did not follow in a corporeal way. It taught her to carry knowledge of it like a stone in her pocket, always present, easily forgotten until you stood on a bridge and heard your name called in the water. The story ends with her understanding that some places do not haunt you with specters, but with a sustained attention that will outwait you, learning and cataloging the shape of those who pass through.